Welcome to this presentation on drivers of ecosystem changes. In the previous video, I had presented to you the various concepts relating to ecosystem and the services it provides. In this video, I shall present to you the drivers of ecosystem changes. The term drivers is used by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Framework of 2005. Let's get into the subject. What are these ecosystems? Ecosystems are very complex, they are very dynamic, and it is a community. It's a community of plant, animals, microorganisms, and these live on the abiotic environment, which is land, water. The relationship between these characters in this ecosystem is very complex, and it works as a functional unit. It means a change in any one of those units in this ecosystem is a cause for change in the other ecosystems in due course of time. It's the biggest gift that we have got from nature, the greatest wealth that we have got from nature. It is on the humanity to protect this ecosystem and make sure that these ecosystems can survive for generations to come. However, the anthropocentric behavior that we human beings have, the economic needs, which are diverse, which are very demanding, and which are different from one place to the other, all of them put burden on the ecosystem and the services it provides. This results in the disturbance of its natural cycles. And when the natural cycles are disturbed, we can see the kind of discourses that are taking place on issues like climate change. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Framework identified drivers of change, and they have categorized that into two. One is called the indirect drivers of change, and the other is the direct drivers of change. There are 5 indirect drivers and 7 direct drivers of change. We shall first look at the indirect drivers. What are these indirect drivers? These indirect drivers, they put pressure on the ecosystem, and they are capable of generating further changes. Once the pressure is put, that pressure rolls over to create further pressures on the ecosystem. And they don't operate in a straightforward manner, rather it has got long winding ways in which it affects. And some of these long winding ways in which it affects the ecosystem are very complex and even difficult to recognize. The first one is the demographics, or the study of population. The population, the world over, we know we have increased the numbers to such levels, we sometimes wonder whether the earth can hold this entire population, feed this entire population, house this entire population, clothe this entire population. The age composition, the spatial distribution of population, the fertility rates, the death rates, the migration rates, all of them affect ecosystem and the services it provides. That is really a burden on the ecosystem. The second one is economic in nature, and which in some sense economics says that the economic growth can improve the well-being of people. However, the economic behavior, economic systems can put very strong pressures on the ecosystem. The first one is the globalization and trade. Countries of the world today are connected with each other, they trade with each other. Trade means movement of goods and services. The movement of goods means the production of goods. Production of good means the use of natural resources. This production of goods creates a lot of pollutants which are discharged into the soil, into the water, into the air. And when these ecosystem services are used this much, then many of the resources can get depleted and many of them get degraded. So globalization has resulted in movement of environmental resources or ecosystem resources from one country to the other through the products that are exchanged. For example, the fruits that come into our country from other countries means the soil of that land is used, the water of that land is used, the atmosphere, the climate conditions of that country is used to cultivate those fruits in those countries and then bring them into this. This way, the entire world is using each other's resources, and this has resulted in economic growth for countries, but at the same time, the burden on ecosystem services. The other economic driver is the increased income. Now, growth means increased income. What is the result of this increased income? This increased income means more demand, more goods that individuals needs for consumption. And when more goods are consumed, we create more waste garbage. And on the other hand, to produce these goods, we find that more resources are utilized. So over we can see that when the economic activities increase, the burden on natural resources, on ecosystem services increases tremendously. Market system adds to it. The competition in the market, the demand for more goods, more income, more production, all of them put burden on the ecosystems. When we say socio-political factors, we are essentially talking about the decision making and the levels at which decisions are made. Decisions can be made at the individual level, they can be made at the community or the national level, and decisions are made at the international level. At the individual level, it could be a farmer making a decision regarding the crop that needs to be grown or the trees that needs to be cut. That's an individual decision. The effect of that will be felt by the farmer in his farm. There are community level decision making done where the decisions are taken by a group of people or a village or a group of villages, where they decide whether trees should be cut or trees should be planted, or how they should use a lake or a river for their meeting their needs. At the national level, the governments could be involved in taking decisions of protecting the environment, and at the international level, we have the international bodies which discuss these issues of ecosystem and prevail upon our member countries of how to protect the environment. The climate change is an issue that is being discussed by all countries, and every effort is being made to reduce the effect of our economic activities on the environment. Do democracies work? Do individuals have right to raise their voice against the issues that they feel that it is causing harm to the environment? Do we have the proper framework that can prevent the kind of damage which will be caused to the environment? Are there safeguards which is available for the use of environmental resources? What is the role of women? Many a movement across the world has on environmental protection has been carried on by women. So what is the role of women? In India, we have the Chipko movement, which was again a women-led movement. What is the role of education in environmental protection? What is the role of civil society? Do these civil societies have the strength to prevent certain kind of abuse of the environment? Are they in a position to unite the people are able to unite and protest against actions that are being planned which will harm the environment, like cutting off trees, or it could be about the construction of roads through a particular forest area. So these are kind of issues that the civil societies can take up, and these decisions can affect the environment in a safe way if it is carried out. What is the role of private sector? How does the private sector look at the environmental resources? Is it only for making profit, or is it also that they have a duty towards the environment and its protection? International issues, and therefore how are international dispute settlement system working as far as ecosystem services are concerned. Now let's look at the fourth driver of ecosystem changes, which is science and technology. Advances in science has been very helpful to understand the dynamics of ecosystem. It has understood what are the causes of the destruction to environment and how they can be safeguarded. These have been used by technology, where they have created systems which can be used to prevent damage to the environment. On the other hand, science and technology has been a cause for much of the destruction in environment. It has led to over-harvesting of living species, and also enlarged use of resources. Technology has helped in informing the fishermen, for example, about the shoals of fish and their movements, which has led to increased harvesting. On the other hand, mining and deep mining has happened because of the science and technology that has developed. So science and technology is a double-sided sword. It has helped ecosystem preservation on one hand, understanding ecosystem preservation, and on the other hand, it has led to disastrous effect on ecosystem services and the resources that it provides. The fifth important change is the cultural and religious practices. Now, this is an indirect driver which is very difficult to assess and measure and find out how these are affecting the ecosystem and its resources. Human values, the beliefs that we have, and the norms that we practice. Each community has got its own value system, its own belief system, and the norms that they practice. These norms and practices, in some cases, protect the environment, where trees are revered, animals are revered, or the landscape itself is revered. While in other religious practices, these may have no meaning at all. So, depending upon the kind of beliefs that people have, depending upon the kind of value they attach to living beings and to plants and animals, that can affect the ecosystem in a very significant way. What is the individual's perception about the world? Do they think that do individuals think that the world has been created for individuals and it is anthropocentric, or do individuals believe that it is biocentric and therefore we are people inhabiting this world that has been created? Or do we believe that we are living in a technocentric world where technology will be able to solve all our problems that environment poses to us? So these are very difficult pressure points to be understood, but nevertheless, the MEA has identified that as a very important element that brings about changes in the ecosystem. Come to the direct drivers of change, which are 7 in number. These direct drivers are more straightforward, measurable, quantifiable pressure points can be identified. These direct drivers have been created because of the indirect drivers, which was more long-winded and difficult to make assessment about. First effect that we can see is on the local land use and the land cover. We have seen that increased food, increased need for clothing, for housing, for transportation, all of them have led to increased demand for land. This increased demand for land has resulted in more land being used from one form to the other. This has also led to deforestation, which is doing much harm to the ecosystem at present. Land conversion is taking place at an unprecedented pace to meet the needs of just one example of infrastructure. Increasing need for roadways, the land that has been used for constructing roadways and the destruction that it is causing to the ecosystems on the land it has been covered. The trees, the animals, the species of animals, the flooding that is taking place on the sides of the constructed roads, railway lines. These are real changes that have taken place because of increased economic demands on ecosystems. Second important element that is causing change in the ecosystem is the introduction and removal of animal and plant species. This is not something that we generally think about because on a regular basis it doesn't affect our day-to-day life, and therefore we don't become aware of this particular problem. Trade is a big reason why these plants and animals move from one country to the other, sometimes deliberately and sometimes accidentally. So when they move in from one country to the other, the habitat of the local plants and animals, the prey for these animals, the water for these animals, all of them at the local level gets disturbed. Once that get disturbed, other things that are in line again get disturbed. Moreover, there are many pests that come in along with the food that we import, or the food grains that we import from other parts of the world. They find place into the country's agricultural system, and once they settle into the country's agricultural system, they are extremely difficult to be done away with. This is what we have seen when we had imported food during the earlier developmental program. The many weeds that have come in along with the wheat that was imported during those days still grow on our land, and we have not been able to do away with many of these weeds that have gone. And similar is the case with pests. These weeds spread far and wide. Lantana is an example, Parthenium is an example. The agriculture development, which has been necessitated because of this increased demand for food, has resulted in quicker adaptation of technology into agricultural activities. This has led to changes in plant breeding activities, which also meant that it requires more nutrient in its growth and sustenance, and finally it also requires genetic engineering. Now, in all of these, what has happened is the natural ecosystem of the earthworms, the rodents, the snakes, the very many microorganisms that exist on the land, they have been adversely affected. Now, this affected means we may lose many of these species in course of time because their own ecosystem, their habitat of these creatures have been lost. We must remember that we do not know, we are not even able to comprehend the value and the contribution the variety of these species can do to human beings. So, the fourth one is a consequence of the earlier one because of change in agricultural. The fourth driver of ecosystem change again is relating to land use and agriculture. So we can understand that changes in agriculture is a cause of major concern for the ecosystem. And here, because of changes in the agriculture, we are looking for more intensive agriculture. Intensive agriculture means in a small area of land, we want to have more crops, which means more pesticides, more insecticides, and high yielding variety of seeds. All of this, more irrigation, all of these have become harmful to the ecosystem itself. So fragmentation of land has taken place because housing has to be provided to a large number of people. So the earlier large expanse of land has been destroyed, and with that we have now lost many of the agricultural resources as well. The fifth important area of concern is the harvest and resource consumption. The increase in direct is a consequence of an indirect driver, and here the indirect driver was the income and technology, changes in technology. Now we can see that they, in some way, they overlap, the direct and indirect overlap, but here we are viewing technology from a direct driver's point of view. So overfishing is one, overharvesting is another, poaching of vulnerable species of animals is another, and wood-based fuel being used is another. All these have resulted in changes in the ecosystem, and they have far-reaching consequences on the ecosystem, and which once we have lost with these species, once we have destroyed land to this extent, we will never be able to recover them in our own lifetime. The sixth one is climate change. Climate change is a direct driver, and this is something that will have its effect on the long term of in the long term. Now, there are climate change essentially refers to the changes or shifts in the pattern of temperature and weather. This results in now many changes in the temperature and weather may be natural because a part of it is natural, which is due to the solar cycles, but a good amount of the changes that we are creating in the ecosystem is the effect that is felt on the climate change. So this climate change in turn is affecting the ecosystem. So the various human activities that we are engaged in is causing harm to the ecosystems. We also have clearing of the forest, we have increased garbage dumping, all of them cause the long-term effect. Then we have the seventh one, which is natural, both physical and biological changes. These have been happening for centuries, and these are the process of evolution of species, and it could be the earthquakes and volcanoes or the changes in the rainfall and pattern, which is natural, and natural fires that take place in forests. These forest fires apparently in their own way, if it has not been disturbed caused by human beings, they have a purpose of they have a purpose in terms of the vegetation of that land and species renewal of that land. These ecosystem drivers can be felt by every single human being. It will result in decreased human well-being because we will, in course of time, will find lesser and lesser resources that are available for satisfying the human needs. We will find that these ecosystem services which have been binding people, when trees are lost, when rivers are no longer usable, when lakes are no longer usable, these were all bodies, natural bodies where people congregate, they celebrate their festivals, they celebrate many and a social event takes place around them. So health is adversely affected. Many diseases are caused because of the invasion of species. Corona was one of them. The COVID that we experienced was one of them. How it can result in the loss of health, it can security. We do not know how safe these, in many cases, people who live near the water bodies, the rivers or lakes, they have lost their economic wealth by floods or by destruction due to the conflict between animals and human beings. These are the kind of security issues that it can create in course of time. When we disturb ecosystem, these are the outcomes. And the last is the freedom that we have to make a choice and to move from one place to the other that gets affected. We have seen that when we have been experiencing excessive rains in those regions of the country where there has not been excessive rain as a pattern, how it has disturbed the economic life of people. So altogether we can understand that Disturbing the ecosystems is disturbing human life on this earth. This very complex ecosystem requires protection. Thank you very much for watching till the end. I'm sure this video has been useful to you as you prepare for your exams or for your classes, and also for the competitive exams that students need to prepare. Thank you. Please do subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe for it and share it with your friends.